Good afternoon. Welcome to Senate Education. It's Friday, February 10th, just a minute after 1. Mr. Forrest, we're so glad that you are going to be with us for the next 30 minutes. We have a much to disappointment of the committee, a rather abbreviated day. We should be finished today by 3, if not a little before. But we are curious to know about, we've heard that St. John's Berry Academy is doing some really interesting things around literacy. We had a conversation around literacy yesterday in this committee. We're going to pick it up later today at 2:30 with the chair of the Literacy Council. And when your head of school was here, Sharon Howell, she talked a little bit about some of the work that you're all doing. So with that, please.
Sure.
The floor is yours, and thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'll just give a little a brief background on my work history.
Yeah.
My name is Dr. Matt Forrest. I'm currently the Director of Special Services at St. John's Berry Academy. I've been in education for 25 years, 21 years in public education. So I started off as a guidance counselor, then an at-risk counselor at high school, vice principal, then superintendent of schools.
In Vermont or around?
Yes, superintendent in Vermont for 5 years, and then the rest of that was in Vermont and New Hampshire.
Great.
So I started off, grew up in St. John's Berry and Concord. So I'm dual certified in both Vermont and New Hampshire as a school counselor, special ed director, superintendent, and principal. I'm also a parent of 2 children who have dyslexia. I also have dyslexia myself. So I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the side of the table as a parent, advocating for services for my children, and as a public school administrator, implementing literacy programs, and now in the public private sector, implementing programs there. So that's my kind of
That's helpful.
background.
And yeah, it'll be helpful to us as we jump into this, that you have both some public and the independent experience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So would you like me to start on you mentioned the literacy programs that Dr. Howell had started talking about?
Yeah, it would be great to hear about that. It's, you're the Director of Special Services. The other thing I would be curious, and I want to put you on the spot here, but we took some testimony yesterday. I believe it's Act 173. Is that what?
Yes, I'm on the advisory committee for
You are, okay. And we did have some testimony where there was a proposal put forward to push out Act 173 implementation. I believe you all also have to follow that. I'd like to know where you're all at with the Act 173.
Sure.
As well.
So I feel like
if you're prepared to do so.
I can give you my personal opinion and then share where I think we're at. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Act 173 Advisory Committee, so everything I say is through the lens of my job in the academy. So in my role, we started talking about RTI at the time. It was Response to Intervention, which is now MTSS, back in 2005. So this is my 4th time implementing an MTS structure into a school setting. I personally feel it would be a disservice to the students to delay any further the implementation of MTSS. Right now, the Academy has an infrastructure put in place for MTSS. We're moving forward with it. We've got a ways to go, but we have Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions in place. The biggest challenge I think we're going to face is providing teachers with training, and we'll need to move forward with providing teacher training, but that's doable. And in every system I've been in, that's where we had to start with Tier 1 training for teachers. So right now for us, we've taken an approach of last year, we had all of our special services teachers and paraeducators trained in the Orton-Gillingham method, which is the #1 method to address dyslexia. We took that approach because 4 years ago when I came on, we recognized that 76% of the students we serve in special services had a reading or writing disability, and we need to have a unified approach to talk about how we're providing interventions, how we're writing IEP goals, and to address that. So in addition to that, we also created a reading and writing lab that is staffed by a reading and writing specialist and a speech and language pathologist. Both are OT instructors, and that's open to any student on campus. So that's open 4 days a week. So we have right now a very targeted method of providing literacy interventions, and also a service that is open to anybody on campus that they can receive that support if they need it. Does that answer some of your questions?
That's helpful. So you would say not to postpone at this point, you're moving forward in your school. That's all.
I mean, I don't understand what postponing it would do. Would be in the same position, I think, down the road. So, and it's doable. I think what MTSS is, right? So when we talk about that, the administration really needs to put an infrastructure in place, and for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports. The teachers just need to be able to provide the instruction at that level and then follow the flow that the infrastructure provides, right? So it's doable. Do we have to provide training? Sure. But I don't understand what kicking it down the road is going to do. And we have way too many students that need the service. So it would be harmful, in my opinion, to push it off any further.
I know that we had that, last year's pro tem, and several folks felt as though had heard a lot from parents not to postpone. Last year, we did give it some extra time, and I don't know how we keep pushing it off myself, but it's
I think students deserve, they deserve more.
But I also recognize their staffing issues and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think with staffing, if you don't mind, one thing that we've recognized, and this isn't just at the academy, but I've recognized it throughout my tenure as a public school educator. Special educators are coming into the system with really limited training on how to provide literacy instruction or math instruction. They're coming out with a really solid foundation on the legality of special ed and how to provide case management, but there's no specialized instruction on how to deliver literacy interventions or math interventions. So what we've had to do at the academy and in my previous experiences is have people come in and provide the additional training to get it there. So if the message is going to be to postpone MTSS and push back the training, my response is we should be providing it now and get on board and recognize the training that the teachers need and put systems in place to do it. And I think for us at the academy, like I said, we do have an MTSS structure in place. We have a student support team that meets weekly to review students' progress, and if they're struggling either academically or behaviorally, or if there's something going on at home. Then we have an MTSS committee that meets bi-weekly. That the sole purpose is to look at the structure of the MTS model and to make sure it's functioning the way that we want it. And we've got a ways to go, right? That we get the data infrastructure isn't where we want it to be yet. So when we put somebody in a tier 2 intervention, we got to figure out how long should they be in there, or what's the success going to be, and to either get out of a tier 2 and back into a tier 1, or to move up to a tier 3 intervention. So we're working through that process, but we've got the system in place. We're headed and moving forward in a really good direction.
Great, thank you. So tell us a little bit about literacy at St. Johnsbury Academy. How do you address these issues? What does literacy look like? What kinds of students are you seeing? That kind of thing.
So I think
I guess the question is, so you start 7th or 9th grade? We
start at 9th.
So maybe one way to ask the question would be, tell us the students that are coming to you with needs around literacy.
Yeah.
From the local public or independent schools.
Sure. I think being at the academy puts us in a really neat position to see those things, because we work with 13 districts. So I work through my office. We work with 18 LEAs. You got 13 districts that are sending students to us. So it really gives us a unique view of what's happening at those lower levels. So what we have seen is an inconsistency in service delivery, sometimes within the school, sometimes within the system, and definitely within the whole gamut. And sometimes that's due to not being able to have, turnover in personnel. Some kid might be getting OG instruction and all of a sudden that person leaves and there's no one trained. I think a turnover in administration at the principal and superintendent level. So you've got a good system moving forward. Then all of a sudden you've got new administration coming in and maybe with a different philosophy, and that's then steering things in a different direction. I think there's a lot of reasons why, but it's definitely creating some issues. You have so we have students coming to us at sometimes at a third, fourth reading level. We have some students who have a developmental intellectual disability who are at a second, third grade reading level. But what we're finding is that sometimes it's an instructional deficit more than the disability. So there's so many gaps in the instruction that they've been given due to those inconsistencies that when we provide a consistent approach like OG, they're making quick gains. So we've had some students that have come into our programs in 9-10, and we've created like an intense OG English class, given them what they needed. And now they're moving out of that class and in their junior, seniors years, moving into standard accelerated classes and out of those classes.
So you're right on the edge of answering my question. How do you screen? I've seen this, your academies and how it came about. How do you identify that these people have a dyslexia problem or a special need so that you can deal with it?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to answer that in two ways.
Okay.
A two-pronged response for you. So one, the kids that are coming into us that are already identified, right? So we're taking, there's a lot of communication with the LEAs. So we take their feedback and their recommendations over testing. So sometimes you might have a kid that's testing poorly, but they're performing at a higher level at what the teachers are seeing. So we've got to take that feedback in there, and that's going to outweigh some of the testing pieces. Then we start screening and seeing where the student is, and then we pair them up with the right instructor. So if is it going to be working with the reading and writing specialist, one of our OG instructors, what's it going to take to move that student forward? Then what we do is we have our STAR assessments, and we just implemented Ames Web, which is another progress monitoring tool. So students are progress monitored bi-weekly, so we can track that intervention. So if they flatline or regress, we can catch it, meet, and then adjust the instructional practice as needed to keep them moving in the right trajectory. The other piece to that is sometimes students are they aren't coming to us on a plan, and they are struggling. So this is the first year we've done this, but we are now offering screenings and testing at no charge to families. So and it's kind of taken off, because so there's these students that may have A's and B's, right? But they're putting so much time and effort into the work. So they're not going into these after school activities and doing these things. They're withdrawing from it because of the effort they're putting in at that time. So we're screening them, listening to the families, and then we're putting something in place for them. So this reading and writing lab that we're talking about, that is open to all students. So now we can provide a service to them, even if the district has not found them eligible for services. So that's what we're trying to do to catch it. We also have had some unique cases, right, where this happened last year, where a parent didn't want the student to be tested as soon as the kid felt like she had dyslexia. AP track, doing really well, turned 18, came in and said, please test me. We did. She had dyslexia, started getting some support. We gave her everything she needed to go to college and get some interventions that she needed. So our job and the message from Dr. Howell has been meet the needs of the students and provide the families with what they need to move forward.
Follow up?
Absolutely.
So you have, let's take dyslexia. You have different levels of dyslexia. I mean, I think I'm moderately dyslexic, but I was never diagnosed.
Yeah. Yes, it's not the same for any kid. And speaking as a father for my daughter has a dual deficit dyslexia, and my other daughter has dyslexia. It doesn't impact her anywhere near the same.
Right.
And you see so many kids coming in with a wide variety. So we've really got to spend time working with them and finding the appropriate way and method to treat
A lot of
them.
people compensate.
Yes, well, because they're extremely bright, and I think and this is more of a systems and a perception piece, but I do feel that an adult's perception of a child's disability is far more debilitating than the disability can be, right? So if you can break through those stereotypes and perceptions, right, and give the child what they need, because we know how to teach literacy, right? It's not a mystery. We know what to do. So when we can identify it and provide it, those kids are going to take off. So it's working through that and giving them what they need. But you're absolutely right. We have to meet the kid at their level, and we can't assume that it's the same for Johnny as it is for Sally, because it's not.
That begs the question, I mean, what if an adult, somebody Senator Williams' age, mid-30s, who's feeling like he might have been, do you go to a doctor? How do you get that test? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, the Stern Center offers a wide variety of tests.
Okay.
I think, that it can be costly
Yeah,
for families.
but there are options for adults.
There
too.
are.
Yeah. No,
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the issues, and I don't want to go too far off the track here, but the state of Vermont doesn't recognize dyslexia, right, as a disability. It's under the SLD in reading, and I think that's an issue. I think that's something I hope at some point it can be addressed, because the way you treat that is very different. The approach you take is different. So to be able to have that discussion is important. Especially when we're talking about servicing these kids in the lower levels in early literacy, you got to be able to talk about what the problem is and the issue, and present it as a learning challenge, not a handicap that they're going to be derailed, right? Because they are. I think a lot of the students that we see are exceptionally bright. So you can have a kid that has maybe a reading fluency or decoding issue, and their overall reading score may be at 3rd or 4th grade, but their comprehension is way up here. So you remove that text barrier, right? They can be in an accelerated class and be fine with speech to text and text to speech. And then you've got to be able to give them intervention at the level they're at. It's got to be a two-pronged approach. You expose them to the grade level content and the vocabulary so they can keep growing, and give them the intervention at the level they're at. If you don't have a two-pronged approach to it, they're not going to make the gains that they need to.
So how would most special ed teachers that are just starting out, don't have the experience, that don't have the background you've got, be able to fit in and actually excel?
So I think a lot has to go to the system that you're working in. Right. So, and this is why I feel strongly that you cannot, I don't want to come off pushy like that, but I feel so strongly that the MTSS, you can't kick it down the road, right? Because if you put a system like that in place, it's going to force those discussions about professional development and the needs that teachers have. And clearly we need to provide professional development to teachers. Right. But if you kick it down the road, you're avoiding the conversation. So I think by having that in place in that discussion, you start to look at the needs that your staff need, and then you provide it. And just understanding that it's going to be something you're going to build over time. It's not going to be a quick fix. And it's not something that we can sit back and say, the AOE needs to provide a model that's going to work for every school, because it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because every system I've worked in, it's looked different in each school, and it's looked different in each school because of the resources that the districts have had. So in one school that I was working in, we were able to provide reading and math interventions in 2 different blocks, right? Because of the resources we've had. In another school that I worked at, there was intervention blocks built into the day, but at that time they either got a reading or math intervention based on what they needed. The schools have got to be able to adapt to the resources and the personnel they have, and not be forced to say, you're following this model, but saying, this is what we expect. No kid should be pulled from tier 1, right? You can't, I've seen this happen too, right? You say a kid's getting a tier 2 intervention and you pull them out of tier 1, you pull them out of the classroom. If you pull a kid out of, let's say a kid has a reading issue, right? So you pull them out of math, or you pull them out of there, you pull them out of the math class to give them a lower level intervention in reading, and they give them the tier 1 reading, but now they're falling behind in math because you pull them out of there. I mean, I've seen that happen. Or you completely remove them out of tier 1 reading and give them a lower level intervention there, and they fall behind there. You've got to create a structure that allows them to stay and have exposure to the tier 1 instruction, in addition, and give them the intervention that they need.
Dr. Force, it seems like there might be also a disconnect, and we've heard this a little bit, from kids transitioning from, elementary, middle to high school. Is there something you all can do to help make sure that when kids arrive at St. John's Berry Academy, they have sort of what they need? Has that conversation been had? Can you help train teacher? I know, can the academy get involved in any way like that?
I think we would welcome that conversation. I think it would have, I think we'd have to start with a conversation to see what the sending schools are seeing as their struggles and needs.
Yeah.
Because just like I mentioned before, each school is going to be unique and different, have different struggles. But I think there's always opportunity for discussions and collaboration. And we do have transitional meetings. The other piece, I've mentioned the Orton Gillingham training. So we open that up to regional teachers, and this is an effort by us to offer that training, especially in the Northeast Kingdom where it was hard. So 3 years ago, when I tried to start that, I had reached out to the Orton Gillingham Academy, it was in New York, and reached out to the Stern Center. There was a 2-year waiting list. We just couldn't get it going. So we found an instructor that one of our teachers had a good connection with, and we provided a full year graduate level 60-hour training. Last year, we provided one this summer. It was open to all teachers in the region. We had 12 teachers.
So you are doing some of those things.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're an elementary school teacher,
They go.
you can go to training
Yep.
at St. J's. And so some of that stuff's happening.
Third one's happening this summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I've really targeted the regional schools. And then we've had some assistance in trying to get out, but it's focusing on Vermont. And I started off by just reaching out to special ed and Title I teachers in the local elementary schools and the special ed directors to get that out there. So we hope to continue that.
A few questions.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you so much for being here and speaking to us. One thing that came to mind is we should probably have a primer at some point on MTSS, because I'm not sure everyone knows what tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 are.
It's a great idea. Yeah,
I would
second that.
Yeah, I would third it. Oh, you've got one?
Well, I
Back
can
up.
show, I don't want to interrupt. I have
Please.
a flow chart for some of the
that's
structure of the MTSS model that we've implemented, and I can pass that out.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll just share with you is that at the Academy, the curriculum committee last year, we created universal accommodations at the Academy because we wanted to empower teachers to be able to make decisions that they felt their students needed without feeling that they had to have a 504 meeting or go to their supervisor to ask permission to do it. So these are accommodations any teacher can implement on their own.
Nice.
So I'll pass those around.
Senator Gillis, you had some follow-ups?
Yeah, I have a couple follow-ups. I missed, how long have you been using Gordon Gillingham?
So this will be the second full year. And we had some people that are already trained, but as a full special services department, this is the second year we've had everybody trained.
Well, I just want to say fantastic, because you're right, that is an evidence-based proven model of reading instruction. So that's fantastic. And it's really wonderful that you're offering professional development to not just your folks, but just around the whole region. That's so wonderful.
And we just charge the cost for the instructor. The Academy doesn't make
Yeah.
any money on it.
That's so great. I was wondering if you all use, because we've been talking about this quite a bit, are you using proficiency-based grading and instruction? Is that part of your?
We have standards. We have standards that the Academy follows. I defer those questions to Dr. Howe.
Sure, yeah, I know, I didn't mean to pick you on. It wasn't what you were planning on talking about today. so
But we
no
do have
problem.
standards that they've created and followed.
Okay, thank you.
We have her coming in at the end of next week to follow up on some of your questions, Senator Gillis,
Great.
around Act 1, and we can raise those with her then as well.
And I don't know if you're interested in this, but this is a list of all the special ed testing and screenings that we offer. This is the first year we've done it, but it shows you what they are and what they actually look for, if you'd like that. Again.
Senator Weeks.
So, good presentation, appreciate it, good subject matter. I'm curious, given your background in both private and public sectors, if you've seen a difference in ratio between special services in the private sector versus the public sector, and if so, any thoughts, any recommendations on what the appropriate level is?
Ratios as far as students within special services. No, I mean, I've seen different, I think what I've, not as far as the population and the needs coming in, what I've seen is the ease in getting services provided seems to be easier within the academy. And I'll give you two examples. My assistant director, Ty Hartshorn, and I went and visited a school, and they had a student with an intellectual disability. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, the goals that student was working on was tying his shoes, counting, but a fantastic kid. We felt we could service that student, but we needed to make some changes, right? We had some other students that we felt that we could better serve, and came back kind of charged up about it. So we had a classroom that we proposed renovating it into an apartment so that students could have an independent, like an intensive life skills class where they could run it like an apartment. You could have the bills come in, they can manage that, they can go, so we put a washer and dryer in it, we upgraded a bathroom, we got all this stuff in it. And I went and I talked to the headmaster, I proposed it, I said, I think this is a great idea, and it was done. I said, okay, well, when do I gotta go to the board? Right? And there was no going to the board. It was okay, you got this, run with it. And if my experience, in the public school going through that, I would have maybe had a couple people opposed to it. I would have had public input on it. And not that any of that's bad, but sometimes there was a lot of pushback on that in my experience as a principal and superintendent. The agility. And then the other thing with the reading and writing lab, the same kind of thing, right? So we had a teacher that moved on, and I proposed to the headmaster that given what we're seeing with the students' needs in reading and writing, we need a reading and writing specialist, not a general special educator. And we talked about the reading and writing lab. She's like, great, run with it. I think that kind of flexibility to adjust and adapt to the circumstances you're dealing with in that kind of time frame, for me, has been refreshing. Not that I have, you can't do it in public schools. It's just different. There's a different process and different hoops you got to go through. And I felt like I've seen great things happen in public schools. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's different. It has a very different feel to me.
Thank you.
The product sells the brand.
Yeah.
And so what you produce, that's your best advertiser right there. Students leave and parents are excited about, I'm just enthusiastic about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the enthusiasm, because it's also fun to work in an environment like that, where you can just, you can see a need for a student and create it and then run with it.
Any other questions for Dr. Forrest? It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Do you have any final comments for us at this point?
No, I thank you for letting me come and have a voice here. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks also for the work that you're putting into the other schools, the elementary schools and all of that. That's a terrific model. I imagine, Senator Fuel, I don't know if you've seen it also, kids coming to you from other schools, other districts with French, how do you kind of bridge that sometimes, making sure that
It's hard.
everybody has that, it's hard.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, we're moving on with S34. This is, we have 30 minutes on an act relating to kindergarten enrollment age. Hopefully after we hear from what I'm thinking might be the final or close to final conversation on this, you never know, we'll have a sense of where the committee stands. Why don't we start with Mr. Nichols? And again, we have altogether, we have about 30 minutes. It looks like we've had a few people added to the list. But I know, Mr. Nichols, you tend to be brief and direct, so this could
Pretty
be.
direct.
Yeah.
You notice that about me. Love that. So for the record, Jay Nichols, Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association, talking to you today about S34. So I know that the AOE convened a group of educators. I was one of those.
Yeah.
To talk about this, and they also convened with some other stakeholders. I don't know who were part of the other stakeholder groups. And our discussion with elementary principals in the last 2-3 drop-in meetings we have every week and with our executive council
And Jay, just so everybody, this bill is in your folder. If you want to have another look at it, this is the bill proposed by Senator Rich and please.
Okay. So I asked people, when's your date, basically? And the vast majority of people are September 1st. And ironically, on the way over here, the Connecticut executive director called me about another issue, and we get talking about this. And he said that they have a January date, and that it's kind of like a September to January date. He really thinks that they're going to try to find something that's more structured, so it's more consistent across the state.
Say Connecticut?
Connecticut, yeah. I'm not sure exactly what that'll look like, but just wanted to share that with you. So we also listened to, or I should say, I listened to Senator Chitten's testimony, his very thorough testimony the other day. And his words were that some students could start kindergarten earlier than their 5th birthday occurring if there was some criteria that was set forth. Not sure who would set the criteria, not sure who would oversee the criteria. How it would be looked at from one kindergarten teacher in one school to another could be completely different. So frankly, we would rather have a firm cutoff date. And we think if you're going to have a firm cutoff day, if you'd want to open up this issue, we think September 1st would be an appropriate date. We don't think there's a need to rush students. We've seen many students that have gone, followed this process, and then maybe in 3rd grade are doing so well that they jump another grade. And our worry is that having kids start too early for some kids, it can be a real detriment academically, but even more so social emotionally. So we would rather wait, make sure you can really assess a kid, see that a kid's in really good shape to do something like that. And if the kid and the parents and school all agrees that it's in the best interest of the kid to skip a grade, do that a little later on. And I also mentioned my little public service announcement. You know that we've had a position for 4 or 5 years for 4-year-olds to go to school as an early kindergarten program full-time like Oklahoma does. Embarrasses me that Oklahoma does that, we don't. S56 fixes that. I know that Senator Hardy brought that forward. Senator Campion, I know he signed on to that, and other Senate leaders have sponsored that. I think that would help us in a lot of ways around this issue too. It would help us economically as a state, as students would get into school earlier. It would help us have eyes on students sooner that may be struggling, students that may have home environments where they don't get the support they necessarily need. They would be in a vocabulary, numeracy rich environment in school through a play-based model as 4-year-olds. So I think if we can make that happen with that bill, that helps take care of much of this problem for parents on the daycare end, which for a lot of parents, that's what it is. I'm not blaming them. But I think sometimes kids get rushed because it's convenient for the parent, and it may not always be in the best interest of the kid in the long run.
Do you have any sense of how many pre-K programs are in our elementary schools now? I can think of in Bennington, just one school pops to mind. But
We have them all over the state.
Yeah.
Many of them are just doing the 10-hour piece because that's the
Right.
only part they can take for credit or get FTEs.
Yeah.
The beauty of this bill is that it would basically be like kindergarten only a year earlier, not academically like kindergarten. It would be developmentally appropriate for 4-year-olds, but by doing it in the schools or making the schools responsible for it. Place that has too many, doesn't have enough room, may have to pay for a licensed place to provide those services, just like you'd have to if you didn't have enough room for kindergarten.
Yeah.
But by doing that, we make sure a licensed teacher is in front of every single 4-year-old in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, and we're picking the bill up, you may have seen, next week, I think, on Tuesday. Thank you.
We're enthusiastically in support of the bill, at least that part of the budget.
Right, that's the part that's
That's-
our sort of,
that's
our
really
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It's good for us to hear, especially the 3 of us who are on both committees. Is now the time to ask a question about pre-K, or should I wait on that?
Sure, go ahead.
I mean,
Yeah.
since you're here,
I'm also here.
I know, that's true, that's true. We're getting, one thing that we keep hearing often in our other committee is that the problem with this public pre-K model is that the day isn't long enough, school day is too short to accommodate many parents' schedules. Is there, just in like, a 10-second response, how do you respond to that?
Well, right now, what we have is a situation where when kids come to preschool and 4-year-old, they are being asked to come sometimes in the middle of the day. Program might be 10 to 1. It's completely untenable for parents. By having it part of the school program, kids can ride the bus. They already do that in Sonoma City. There are preschools that already do that. People used to say, oh, you could never have 1st graders ride the bus. And then it was, you could never have kindergartners ride the bus. But we have places that have 4-year-olds ride the bus every day without any problem. And we have after-school programs in many of our schools. I'd like to see us have them in every school, and that helps address that dynamic as well.
Okay, cool, thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. So So returning to this, are you, what are sort of your concluding comments on S34?
If you're gonna touch it,
Yeah,
pick a firm date of September 1.
For the
and
state.
leave it at that for the state.
for the state.
Yeah, it does make sense to have the same day in the state. That really does, because we have weird situations now where a kid enrolls in a kindergarten in one public school
Yeah,
and then moves to another public school. And another public school wasn't going to allow the kid to be in there, but now they're already in kindergarten, so they're already going to think about that decision. And always they try to err on the side of the kids. So the kid might go there, but now the kid's younger than everybody else in the class. It's just better if it's across the state. That consistency that Senator Chittenden asked for, I think, if you're going to open this up, I would definitely.
and for that consistency, just so I know, you're talking about a date rather than a range, like.
Definitely
you're
a
saying
gate.
A date.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, please.
But it's appropriate maybe to comment on waivers because
The issue with waivers is, and this is also gonna be the issue. First of all, if you did it at the state level, who's gonna oversee it? I don't know who would oversee it. If you do it at the local level, each kindergarten teacher is gonna have a little bit different perspective on whether a kid's quite ready or not.
Right.
You know, you also get the dynamic that Senator Chittenden talked about. You're more likely to have female students that are ready before male students are. But do we want to have the female students into the school earlier when we have female students from 11 to 14 that have a much higher ideology of suicidal behavior and stuff than we do males at the same age? I mean, I'm really worried about our girls 11 to 14 years old across the country, and in Vermont, we're no exception. So I don't think we want to mess with that dynamic personally,
so in summary,
in summary.
you're not a fan of waivers.
I'm not a fan of waivers. Yeah, I'm not a fan of waivers.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Wanted to kind of get it.
No,
Thank you.
And if we were to do waivers, build in, have somebody look at what are the guidelines we would give
well,
a decision maker.
yeah, I'd want to make sure there was social emotional aspect.
Right, understood.
Yeah, because it's too often just focused on academic piece and we have kids that are
Yeah.
not.
I think your point's a great one.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Bennett.
Good afternoon, Jeff Fannin from EA. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about S34. I have really rather brief comments about it. I'll start by saying Vermont EA's policy position on early education is, I think it's great to have kids in the school setting for developmentally appropriate play-based kindergarten. So whether it's 5 or 4, certainly we think that's good to have them in the public school setting. There's capacity there, we can do it. And there are some great programs where they are doing it, and that's great. To Senator Gulick's point, I think Jay, answered it well, which is there are after-school programs that run alongside the schools. My kids did it, and it works, and it can work, and allow me and my wife to work a full day and not spend so much time with our kids, and they're probably better off for it. So that's all good. As to I also agree with my colleague Jay. You've got to have a firm fixed date. I think the waivers are a challenge, and you're going to get varying ways of application. I don't think the AOE should be put in that position. I'm not sure they want to be put in that position, and I'm not sure they have the capacity to be in that position. So I don't think we should set up a system that the AOE won't do well in. Right? And why set somebody up for problems and parents and families and communities and schools and teachers. It's just, I think it's too many potholes along the way. So with that, we think a firm fixed date on S34. We like that. That's good. And we support expanding younger students into the school system with aftercare programs, with access to emotional supports that are available in schools and are available in schools. And so we think that's a good idea as well. So we'll stop there. Really short.
Questions or comments from Mr. Fannin? Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Minor?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me today and giving me the opportunity to speak on this bill. And thank you for your service on this beautiful Friday. Just for those of you that don't know me, I've served as a Vermont educator for 20 years, both as a teacher and as an administrator. And I also am the proud mom of 2 daughters that are still on the younger side. I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I remember the kindergarten enrollment process well from my own personal perspective. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the principals in my school district, but also as president-elect for the Vermont Superintendents Association. And our views are very similar to what you've just heard. Our preference would be that you take no action on the kindergarten entrance age, as the system that we currently have works well. Speaking for Chittenden County, the majority of us have a September 1 entrance date. Some of us have on or before, so it's not 100% the same, but it's September 1. We also would be opposed to the waiver process. I'll speak to you directly around why we feel that way. And then we would like to see the General Assembly not place the decision-making authority for when a student starts public kindergarten in the hands of individual families. So if I speak a little bit about the waiver process, in my district, we do see a number of families make requests to enter kindergarten early. And what I have seen in my experience is the vast majority of the families have made these requests, have a commonality. They have been historically advantaged, typically white families that are not experiencing poverty or disabilities. The students that whose families are advocating for them are students who have skill-based access to high-quality preschool, access to time with their peers, and oftentimes they have had access to paid co-curricular opportunities such as sports, private music lessons, etc. It has also been a process with waivers where we have had families pay for an outside evaluation to demonstrate that their child should be allowed to enter kindergarten early. As you know, these assessments can be expensive and they are often biased towards the historically advantaged. So when we think about the waiver process, we would want the process to be consistent across the state, implemented with fidelity, but we would also want that process to be accessible to all. And I think we have great concerns that any type of waiver process, it would be hard to ensure that every family and every student in the state of Vermont would have the same access to an equitable waiver where all students would be able to demonstrate that they had the skills to enter kindergarten early. I think this is why, as Jay mentioned, the potential universal preschool for 4-year-olds is really something I think that's important for our state to take a look at. The other component that I'd like to mention that I don't think you've heard yet is schools have strong processes for advancement or for retention. So once students enter kindergarten, every school has a process where we can identify students that are achieving above grade level, and we would use that existing process to advance students when necessary. Sometimes the advancement might not happen when the student is in kindergarten, but in first grade. The other component that I think is really important to consider when you think about waivers is that if the early entrance is wrong and the waiver were to be approved, there's a risk for that student to be demoted or retained in a grade level. And that component can have significant long-term negative effects for the student. Social peers change, this stigma that they are not smart. We don't want that process to happen. Enrolling students with this standardized date, which we are in support of as September 1, allows schools to get to really know students as they are engaging in the rigorous curriculum that's happening in kindergarten and first grade. And we have that ability to accelerate students if need be, rather than putting them at risk of being retained if they do enter kindergarten too early. And so I know I've given you my written testimony, and I wanted to just give you some of the highlights as to what our position is on this issue. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Ms. Minor. And I have to say, your written testimony is great. So if committee members have an opportunity to read it, I hope everybody will. Any questions for Ms. Minor? Yes, Senator Weeks.
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
That was a no.
That was a no.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Kulik, is this a constituent?
It's not a question, Superintendent Minor. It's just a word of thanks. You do amazing work and you're so appreciated, and your comments, especially those around equity, were really important for us to hear. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you for all you do as well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cameron?
Two people with me. Is it all right if they join me at the table?
Absolutely. Bring your chairs right up.
Sorry.
You have Flor Diaz-Smith with you
Yes.
and Tara or Tara?
Tara.
Tara Sweet, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Cameron. I'm the Associate Executive Director of the Vermont School Boards Association. I'm Flor Diaz-Smith. I'm the Vice President of the Vermont School Boards Association.
Chair Sweet, I'm a board member at VSBA, and I'm also Chair of Fletcher and Franklin West School District.
We have a lot of suites in Bennington. Do you have any relatives down there? No, okay.
Mostly centered in Franklin County.
You do run into any, you'll tell them how to vote.
I'm sure they will. The suites in Franklin County will as well.
Thank you, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the committee today about S34, which you know is an act relating to kindergarten enrollment age. So currently, a school district determines a cutoff date between August 31st and January 1st to enroll 5-year-old students as legal pupils in kindergarten. Further, school boards develop and superintendents implement policies addressing class size based on a variety of factors. And I attached for you a model policy that the VSBA provides to school boards on class size. It's Appendix A, page 3, probably in your testimony. And I just would highlight for you implementation point 2 and 3, which speaks to the need to consider geography, school size, programmatic needs, teacher-student ratios, special education, tech ed, and English learners as they're making decisions about enrollment. In the absence of a resolution that addresses kindergarten enrollment age, the VSBA assembled representatives from all 11 regions, which we have a newly established committee called our Legislative Committee, to address the important elements and potential consequences of this proposal. And the following position was developed by the committee. So first, I'll accept one board member on the committee served in a system with a September 1st or an August 31st cutoff date, and that speaks to the very small variability across the state. The one board member that did have something different was September 30th. Second, some level of flexibility is needed in order to respond to the individual needs of students, as well as to consider all of those many factors that school systems consider when they're thinking about enrollment and staffing and utilization of resources. And third, a standard date is not needed, but if there is to be a standard date for kindergarten age cutoff, the date should be no later than September 1st. And this is really speaking to developmental appropriateness for young children. So the further in the calendar year we get, the younger the child would be entering kindergarten. The VSBA Legislative Committee also discussed that potential changes to kindergarten entry age would need to be analyzed with respect to pre-kindergarten. And further, the committee was and continues to be particularly concerned about the need for flexibility at the local levels we've been talking about. On December 1st, we joined a meeting with the Agency of Education, and you have the report from the AOE that states the cutoff dates have a large impact on student success, classroom size, and student enrollment. Act 166 of 2022 required a written report on the impact of standardizing the entrance age threshold for public schools. S34 includes language that was not originally presented in the information we were considering as a legislative committee. The additional language would allow a school district to recommend deferred admittance to kindergarten for a student attaining age of 5 within that window, but would prohibit the school district from denying admittance of the kindergarten age student in the same time frame if the guardian chose to enroll that student, regardless of the recommendation. So with regard to this language, the VSBA Board of Directors developed the following position just Wednesday night. The VSBA opposes additional language prohibiting a school district from denying enrollment of a child if the parent seeks to enroll the child regardless of the district's recommendation, that this should remain a local decision. And I would just note several of our board members offered to come in and testify, including a school librarian and a school nurse. So of note is S56, as others have talked about, which is relating to childcare and early education. This bill proposes to amend 16 VSA 829 to redefine pre-kindergarten child as a child who is on or before September 1st, 4 years old. So we think the consistency would be useful there if we used a similar date. The bill further would provide public pre-kindergarten education, high quality, publicly funded, full day pre-K education at a public school, either within their school or to be paid to a provider if the school did not have capacity to do that. So we support that as well, as it would address the many needs of children and families in our communities. So in conclusion, Vermont's public education system is complex and multifaceted. Any shift, whether perceived small or large, will require school systems to adapt. And ensuring that what we're asking our kids to do is developmentally appropriate is always essential. It is highly essential post-COVID. And I attached for you, again, the model policy that we provide to school districts, and then some laws that play into this concept. Absolutely.
Questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. Ms. Cameron, are you coming back to speak to us about early education? Is that, or is that now?
No, please. if
I'm
you want
happy to come back
Yes.
at your convenience, whenever that works. I'm an early childhood special educator by trade, and I'm also an occupational therapist, over 20 years working with young children. I would also point out this morning, Lori Connors-Tedros delivered really informative testimony in Senate Health on this topic, and she's from the National Institute of Early Ed Research. So if you haven't had a chance to listen, she was fantastic this morning.
She was there this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we would, of course, welcome you back. We're jumping into this topic, the early childhood piece next week. Next week is full, but the following week, we're going to start to be putting together a variety of experts as well as other providers, and it would be great to have you in that.
Be happy to.
Great, please.
Just a clarification. So I believe in your testimony and in your verbal, you've written in your verbal testimony that regarding waivers, that the General Assembly does not create a waiver process for requirement. Isn't there a waiver process now? I'm a little unsure. I thought that there was latitude for local boards or local education organizations to choose, to evaluate. But this says, do not create a waiver. Is your recommendation that we don't need one at a state level, but it's okay having one at a local level?
Ms. Diaz?
Yeah, what we don't want is to have the parents have the option to come and, correct me if I'm wrong, to have the option to come, and if the recommendation from the administrators was that the kid was not ready to be at school at that particular age, similar to what Amy was talking about, we don't want the ability to overrule the decision of the administrators, which is different than a waiver.
Right. I think to Senator Lewis's good point, you mentioned that waivers do work in your district, or they can, and they are
Yes.
used, and I don't think the committee is looking to close that
Exactly.
option.
Yeah.
But I see what
That's
you're
not
saying.
what,
That's
that's not what,
what
at
you're-
least the language of the bill, it
Right.
speaks to taking that way.
And if I could just add on the waiver piece, the child's development is absolutely critical, all aspects of their development. The one piece that a parent could not, likely would not be able to provide information on is the full context of what's going on, right? So are they the 26th child in a classroom with capacity for
Right.
25? Is there another child who's applying for a waiver who has special needs or is an English learner, right? There's so many pieces that administrators are considering, and so
Sure.
it's a big picture that
It's a great point.
deserves a lot
Senator
of
Williams.
consideration.
So I'm going back to Senator Chittenden's testimony. I thought that he was in fact looking for a waiver for his child.
He was looking for a waiver from his district. His district allowed him to apply for the waiver, and as I understand it, he was turned down. Yeah, and so,
But the language in the bill that he submitted doesn't ask for waivers.
they already, right, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Diaz-Smith, but what you're concerned about, you're comfortable with waivers continuing in the state, but you don't want to give parents the authority then to say,
I
hey,
don't agree with you.
I don't agree with you, my child's about to enter school, it could,
And just like,
despite what the professionals have recommended, and as Ms. Cameron said, class size is a factor, all those kinds of things.
yeah, and you also have to take into consideration that we have policies, that's how we govern the school board, govern the policies, so we have our policies, which I'm happy to share what our policy says, but as for members, we can legislate or write policies around one individual, right? Or one, it's got to be like a very data informed decision, so we can, like I'm hearing clearly that there is this desire, right? I was just that it would be better to take the whole picture into consideration, because otherwise there's no equity around this issue here. Narrowing it down to just one particular circumstance, which doesn't speak to where we are in the state.
But I'm inclined to want to do and I'm just
Yeah.
one vote, but, get a consistent date in there, allow the waiver process to continue as is. But again, not allow, let the buck stop, frankly, with the school personnel. But it does seem to me for somewhere along the process in rules or somewhere to at least be able to give people some guidance around waiver decisions. But that's something we can have an additional conversation about. Ms. Sweet, any comments from you?
No, I mean, as a district at Franklin West, I know we're at capacity, so having
Yeah.
that, letting parents make that decision would really put us at a disadvantage, because we're busting at the seams. Fairfax just got a bond to add more kindergarten classrooms because we're busting at the seams in that school, so.
Something in the water down there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my own
Bennington
school
there
has
is.
20 more kids than last year, so, yeah.
I do want to thank both of you for serving on your school boards. It is a huge job. It is an incredibly important job. And talk about a public service. So thank you both. And Ms. Cameron, I don't know if you're on board now, but yeah. Thank you both very much. And thanks for taking the time to come in here today. And please, as things come up, feel free to be in touch with any and all of us if you have suggestions on the work that we're doing or ideas that you think will improve, life for kids.
Yeah, can I add one thing?
Please, of
Just
course.
to speak to what Jack said.
Yeah.
Our district is that district that has preschool, and we've been able to partner with our after-school program and before-school program. So we do offer more than 10 hours. So, we would benefit of the extra funding for our schools.
I have something to add.
Of course.
Yes,
Sorry,
Yes.
yes, we have 1 minute. Right now, for schools to offer after-school programming for 3 and 4-year-olds, they would have to be regulated under Agency of Human Services. So that's another hoop to jump through, and it's another barrier. So it's definitely another piece of the puzzle to consider as we're thinking about
Mhm.
changing the picture.
And you won't forget that, I hope, when you come back.
Got it written down.
Okay, great. Senator Pruitt, did you want to?
I was gonna say, S56 addresses that issue to a certain extent, doesn't it?
It may. I'm going to do a deep dive into that over the next few days.
Okay, great.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, we're going to jump into some high school athletic conversations, but let's just take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. Great.